Welcome back to the WeMaple video show. Today we're joined with award-winning composer and author, marketer, colleague, friend, David Andrew Wiebe. What's up, man?
Hey, how you doing, Matt? Been looking forward to this.
Hey, me too. I'm glad we got it all set up. We were just commenting on your shirt. What is the indie?
Yeah, the Indie YYC is one of the communities I started with a collaborator in Calgary a few years back, and we were looking for a new outlet for different types of unique, creative, artistic events. We wanted to do things like mix up some authors and poetry writers and musicians, and then not like an open mic format, but like almost like a creative circle. They would go back and forth sharing some of their works. So the songwriter would share a song, the poet would share one of their pieces, author would read a section from their book. And we created a lot of interesting events like that. I think there was an experimental music event, and there was also a poetry event where we'd had a band that was backing people up and kind of improvising some tunes.
Yeah, right on. And yeah, those were from your days back here in Calgary, and now you're out. Are you back in Vancouver, Victoria?
Yeah, Nanaimo to be exact, and Victoria, of course, would be on the same island.
And where was the event? Let's get into it. So you went west and decided, hey, I'm going to throw a music festival.
Yeah, I mean, I came out this way ultimately in 2019, and then I was planning to travel. I was going to head to England. Didn't really pan out that way because of the pandemic. So I was barely here, I don't know, 3 months, maybe 6 months before there was a pandemic shutdown. So for 2 years, of course, locked up in a basement suite in Abbotsford. And then last summer, I had this idea. I was sitting down and reading a book called Parallel Universes of Self. And I had this idea that, well, maybe the missing piece in my business right now is an opportunity for people to gather and come together and for me to share my works and launch. So I had this really crazy and wild idea that if I could launch new products, new books, new music, new comedic series all at the same time, bring people together to enjoy it with, that we'd have a good time and it would be a great addition to my business. So got into the process of building a team, started organizing and planning and promoting that event in Victoria. Victoria seemed like a good place because it's a tourist destination, but it's not so huge that there's so many other distractions. And on any given night, people might want to attend an event like mine where there's a mix of live music and multimedia. But there were a lot of things that kind of started going wrong on the way to planning it. Everything was going right pretty much until I drove back to Calgary to play a gig there. And then a whole bunch of things unfolded that, well, the event still went off and it did all right, but it didn't do what I hoped it would do.
What did you hope your event would do and that it didn't do?
I think we were planning to have an attendance of about 100 people. And we certainly put in the advertising and PR work and other promotional work to have that happen. In fact, we invited the featured artist that I wanted to be there, declined. So she couldn't be there, which was already kind of a challenge. But I thought, well, I'm going to collaborate with people on the island and figure out who's popular, book them, and then they'll have a draw. And it ended up that they really didn't have much of a draw. So almost everyone that was there at my event was there because of me, because I'd invited them. And many of them, you know, you and I have done a lot of deep work in Landmark Worldwide without giving away a ton of details. Most of the people that attended were part of that leadership program that we've been part of as well. And so it was really great for all those people to come out and support me and support the event. And we were really hoping for a little more local support as well.
Right on. Yeah, events are never easy, and then like when it's not that it was a flop in that way, you didn't reach your goal, but do you view that as like a huge stepping stone and an opportunity for you to do it again, or do you view it as like lessons learned, let's move on and not do that again, or what's your vision?
Yeah, I think for the time being, we can continue to do it in a smaller capacity. Because I thought about it and I was like, if I was to do it right now, I sort of just wouldn't bother until we had a certain amount of demand and notoriety, like people are begging for it. But we could still do local small events where it's a lot more laid back. We're not like shelling out a bunch of money to book a venue and merchandise. We just make it, here's an hour of music. Now go and network and talk with each other and enjoy each other for half an hour. Here's another block of music. Go and enjoy each other for half an hour. And then here's a quick little closing presentation. Maybe have it all wrapped up by 9:30 or 10 at night, and book it in a venue where there's drinks and food that people can enjoy in between. So just really make it a chill, laid back, easygoing. Come as you want, stick around if you want. I think we could do stuff like that and have it be a modest to moderate success right now. But yeah, trying to do what we just did again is not the best idea.
We were talking earlier, and you were saying to ask you what your guitar teacher told you. What was that?
Well, I decided when I was 15, no, actually, I guess it was ultimately 17. I knew that I wanted to do something in music when I was 14. I started writing really bad rap lyrics, but at 17, I decided, yeah, now is the time for me to pick up the guitar. And I noticed a friend playing guitar by the campfire, and he was playing all the popular songs of the time: Blink 182, Sum 41, Matchbox 20. And I said, you can do that? So right then and there, I'm like, I got to start learning. And my sister was going to college and I was in grade 12. So she met someone that played the guitar and was also a guitar teacher. Before I knew it, they had set me up, and he started coming every week to teach me the guitar, which is great. And then what he told me in that first lesson, and pretty much ever since, is, hey, you surpassed me in the first lesson. I've been playing for 13 years. Imagine what you can do in 13 years.
Wow, I mean that must be a huge, or must have been a huge boost for your self-esteem. Hey, or like obviously he's saying that in some sort of humorous or to be supportive, but did you take that to heart? Did that stick with you? Because you've gone on to have some pretty great accolades in music. You've gone on to have quite a long career in music. Do you think that what he said carried a lot of weight and supported you along the way?
You know, probably because of upbringing and religion and pretty much the context in which I was raised. I just had that false modesty that we all have about ourselves. And I would just, when he'd say stuff like that, I'd be like, well, this part of my technique could use some improvement. And he's like, no, from now on, you just let people talk about you. You don't say anything about you anymore. And I think that was the most valuable lesson out of all of that, was to, like, if people praise you and give you accolades, you just let them do it. You don't try to change their mind or get down on yourself or self-deprecate. So I don't know whether, yeah, you might be right. Like maybe he was joking, or maybe he was half serious or facetious or whatever it was, but giving me the opportunity to really explore that side of myself, that definitely made me work harder at the guitar.
Yeah, that ties into something else we were chatting about this idea of betting on yourself or, believing in yourself. I can relate similarly to what you described with that guitar teacher. There was a vice principal at our high school, and when I first got into video was showing up early in the morning and doing like an in-school news show. And he's one of the first people I ever remember taking me aside and looking me dead in the eyes and saying, "You know what, Matt, you're really good at that. About at that making those videos in the morning. Keep that up." And it was this like encouraging, like it felt like the first time someone really took me aside and believed in what I was doing. Um, is that similarly to what you're kind of describing with the guitar teacher? And then how does that tie into this idea of betting on yourself?
Yeah, I think the connection there is music, because the way in specific way in which I decided to bet on myself, in this case 2009, music was a part of it. There was a new media program at SAIT, so that's the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, for those who don't know listening. in Calgary. And so I was,
Our three fans. Shout out three WeMaple video show fans.
yeah, there you go. But in case for posterity or anyone that's not watch that doesn't know, um, so I was looking at a new media program, and it was centered on composing, on video editing, and podcasting. And that sort of appeared to me like in a couple of years prior, I had interviewed Tommy Tallarico, found it to be a very inspirational interview. You know, Tommy has since sort of been revealed as storyteller, to put it nicely. But even so, it was great to be able to chat with him. And he's done some cool things with Video Games Live and Electric Playground, or EP, on TV. So at least in that sense, you know, he was an inspirational figure for me at the time. And so I thought, wow, like new media, that sounds like the perfect combination of things that I might want to choose in my life right now. So I applied to the program, but it's a little late, right? It was probably August or something. And I did not get in. They just didn't have enough seats. My grades were fine. They were like, "Yeah, you're good to go," but unfortunately, the class is full. So then betting on myself looked like I'm going to try to learn those things anyway. I don't have the best gear, the best computer, the best microphones. I think I started recording on a headset of all things. And some people do that now. It's kind of a standard practice, but it was still a pretty big unknown in 2009 to begin podcasting. And then the popular, like I chose video games and movies as my, what I wanted to create videos about. And at the time, you had maybe like Angry Video Game Nerd and Nostalgia Critic and Spoony Experiment and stuff like that. But that's it. Those were the only examples I'd had. So that's where I got started. And betting on myself looked like learning those skills, like becoming a new media creator without the help of a school or a system.
Yeah, that's very similar to how I started too. Also at SAIT, there's something about the way in which those programs are structured at that school that instills a little bit of that independence, creates an atmosphere where people can really hone in on the thing that they want to hone in on. Do you think that formal education is needed in the creative space? You mentioned video games. There's obviously the like how to use software or how to use a camera, these technical proficiencies that are required in order to do your craft. But do you think that, or where do you think that intersection is to, naturally gifted, good at the art, would succeed with or without school versus like school being an essential piece to a career?
Hmm. That's a great question. And, you know, I ended up eating crow a lot recently on things I previously said. So I can't say definitively what's right for another. What I will say was for me, that was the right decision because I had the gear and the equipment. I had a home studio at the time. It was simply a matter of applying myself and being willing to ask questions and learn and like push through the challenges and the difficulty. I remember wanting to throw my laptop across the room sometimes, usually to do with graphic design because I had a web and graphic design company going at that time too. And I get so frustrated because I'm like, I don't know how to use the stupid Photoshop thing. But the reality is this, and this was instilled in me through people like Steve Pavlina and Derek Sivers. They graduated with a degree in college or university in a year, not 4 years. They did 4 years of schooling in a year. They worked with the administrator and said, look, I don't want to stretch this out. I don't want to go at a Trump's pace or somebody else's pace. I want to go at my pace. So load me up, figure out how I can do this entire 4 year degree in a year. And they did it. So it's been instilled in me ever since that you can go at your pace. And if that's a little slower than everyone, that's okay. If it's a little faster than everyone, that's okay. But it's so much, you're going to get so much more experience fiddling around with a microphone like this experimenting with being closer or further from the microphone, you know, setting up your own scissor arm on a desk, plugging it in, buying an audio interface, messing around with the compression. You're going to learn way more there than kind of sitting with a textbook in front of you, trying trying to understand the theory of how this all works.
100%. And that ties into the passion piece too, because to do what you just described, to play around and learn the technical proficiencies, you have to really want to be doing the thing. And so it almost kind of weeds out like really how passionate are you. It's kind of like the task is pressing, like how much do you want to learn this? And if you keep going and going and going and learning on your own, you continue to develop that love for the thing, and you learn the technical proficiencies along the way.
Definitely. I mean, in 2009, I barely had any income. I was still managing to survive. I was brand new at new media and becoming a new media creator. I really had no idea where that would take me. The seeds that I planted back then did eventually make me into an award-winning composer. So, was it worth it? Yeah. And it's helped me get well over 111,000 podcast downloads. Maybe not anywhere near what some experts and gurus have done, but still an accomplishment.
Wow, 6 digits on the old podcast downloads, hey? What's something that is something to strive to do. What do you think about the marketing and promotional aspect? And I'll put this in a context. We've been experimenting on the WeMaple video show with advertising promotional spend to increase the view counts, in particular on YouTube. What are your thoughts on the optics and social proof and the way in which people perceive different things? Do you think that it plays a role for people to follow you by seeing, I'll use this example, like when we did our first episode, it maybe got 100 views. And then we put a promotional budget on one of the episodes, and then we're over, 1,500 views. Do you think that if someone stumbles across the YouTube channel, the psychology of seeing more views would make them more attuned to want to watch it or listen to it?
Great question. Yeah, I think there's a lot of false promises out there around social media, and realizing first and foremost that most of us are just kind of trying to watch what our favorite personalities are doing and then mimicking or modeling them, which is not incorrect. I think that's a good place to start. But recognizing also that if Gary Vee puts something out, it's automatic, million views. If Grant Cardone puts something out, automatic, immediately 11 million views, whatever it is. You and I, though, if we want to get noticed, if you want to get seen, we got to structure our content in a very specific way. We can't be sitting there rambling about ourselves. We can share stories and experiences, but we have to make the video about the viewer. And then there's the aspect of it where you're talking about credibility. The number one reason to advertise, we would think, is conversion, because you and I are business owners and entrepreneurs, and we're like, we really want, like, I don't want to put money into engagement. We want to put money into getting money back. But the number one reason to put money into advertising and to keep doing that and to keep showing up in front of an audience is that you become known. Your face gets seen. You get to establish yourself as a celebrity or a guru or an influencer or an expert in some capacity. So if your face gets continually seen, then there's credibility. But numbers, yeah, they can be all over the map. Sometimes they're faked. Sometimes they're inflated. Sometimes it's a one-off and like someone goes viral one day and then it's forgotten for 10 years. All this stuff happens. So does it make people want to follow you more and listen to you more? I think it does. I do think it plays a role. And by the same token, if it's not real views, it's only going to do so much.
Share with our viewers, what was the worst day? What was the absolute worst day?
Uh, I don't even know, but I'll say,
Is that how you framed it? You let me get your exact wording here. Oh, Huh. Isn't that interesting? Because I know the story, I framed it worst day, but you actually just called it growing up in Japan and the moment that changed everything.
Right. Yeah. Um, that definitely ties in. So I guess we're on the same wavelength after all. But yeah, so I grew up in Japan. My family moved there when I was 5, turning 6. My parents had been there previously. They enjoyed it. My sister was born there before I was born. They were in Fukuoka. They returned to Canada. My dad was making insane amounts of money as a Bible school teacher. I say that facetiously because there's no money in that. And they decided, hey, we like Japan, and there's this opportunity to become a teacher. And I don't think it was all income based, but that might have been one of the factors in making that decision. Let's go be English teachers and missionaries in Japan once more. So when I'm 5 in Camrose, Alberta, Nowheresville, we decide to move to Japan. And this time, not Fukuoka, but Hyogo. There's a city called Takarazuka in between Kobe and Osaka. So I grew up there, all the culture shock and awkwardness and learning the language and all that stuff embodied. And then at 13, my dad gets into a motorcycle crash and I get called down to the office at my school. And I'm like, oh boy, what did I get in trouble with today? This is not going to be good if they're calling me to the office. And it wasn't, but it wasn't what I thought. Yeah, they took me immediately to the hospital where my dad was receiving emergency care, which is already kind of hard to see. And he was in a coma for 10 days and then he passed away. So, in many ways, that did color the rest of my life and who I became. And then a lot of the work that we've done, a lot of the deep internal leadership work that we've done in personal development for me was untangling and working through that trauma and coming out on the other side a whole person.
What was that like? Like at that age, seeing your dad in a coma.
Yeah. At that age, it was kind of like, hey, it's candid camera, right? Like someone's going to jump out soon, not Ashton Kutcher, but someone's going to jump out soon and say, hey, just a joke. He's okay. Everything's fine. And that never happened. And we were a Bible and God believing family. We prayed and prayed and prayed for healing, and he didn't heal.
Wow. And then you came back to Canada not too long afterwards. Yeah.
That's correct.
And then you discovered music, and through your experience in post secondary at SAIT, you formed that sort of independence or that kind of want to do it on your own kind of vibes. And then you've essentially been supporting yourself as an entrepreneur for the most part ever since then.
That's correct.
That really takes something. I acknowledge what that what that takes to be essentially self-employed for what coming up on 15 years, 20 years.
Yeah, pretty much. Most of my, yeah, the last time I had any kind of part time employment would have been in 2011. And then the last time I had any kind of casual employment would have been 2016.
Got it. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times how we, well, funnily enough, we had met like 10 years ago and then we were on this program together and didn't really even notice right away. But you've referenced it a couple of times. We're in this program and this training and development work. What have you taken from that work that you've applied to your career?
Hmm. There's a lot of things that kind of struck me as being pretty important. There's one course, and it's usually the second one people take, but not always. It's the advanced course. The advanced course gets you out of your head in a really big way. Like it defines that action or performance is action. If you're not in action doing something, there's no performance. And so, by that definition, thought is not action. Now, I think thought is important because you got to think about the things that you're working on. And I think reflection is incredibly valuable too. But just understanding that thinking is not in the realm of performance. So, because we get so caught up, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people get so caught up in thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say and how am I going to say it? Or what am I going to do today? Oh my God, I'm so busy. Oh my God, I'm so busy. But all that's happening on the outside is they're sitting on a couch looking at their phone. They're not doing anything. So if we can take that out of the equation and most of that out of the equation and say, I'm not thinking so much, I can just go and do, holy cow, that like right there, a huge increase in productivity. You can get way more done without sitting around thinking about it so much. Or how about the concept of life is a game? Everything's a game. No piece of this is like meant to be taken seriously. We create the rules, we keep track of it, of the score on the scoreboard, and every week we make new promises for actions and conversations that we're going to take to achieve that game. I think it's we sometimes do take it very seriously in the program, but I think it's intended to be lighthearted. Let's have fun. Let's play a game. Let's not create like this monumental, insurmountable goal or project or objective.
Yeah, I got that. There's another adjacent program that I was involved in. It talks about as men being three dimensional, that you need the, like, say, the Clint Eastwood, like, get shit done kind of masculine energy. And then you need the, like, the curly, they use, that's an older group. So they reference Three Stooges. Like, you need that fun. And then there's a third dimension. I can't remember what it is, but it's being able to know when the right way to, or right time to be having that fun, but that you still need to also know, or we need to also know as men, when to be serious. And then whatever the other, whatever the third kind of piece is. We've talked before about masculinity and culture and how things have changed in the last couple of decades. What are your thoughts, just generally speaking, first, on how, and especially growing up without, your birth father, essentially, too, and the impact that that had on your development? So, yeah, what are your thoughts on, like, the role of men in culture and society these days?
Yeah, sort of taking out the equation, maybe any fault or blame that we might place on things. If we just took a really close look at the conditioning that's happening through media, through school, through the government, through every authority, it's that we're basically conditioning to be more in touch with our feminine side. That's not a net loss. It's not all wrong, but generally it is kind of turning men into something that we're not. Like, you look at previous generations, our grandpas, for example. Like, one of my one grandpa was a very hard man, the one that just passed away. He worked on farms his whole life. He thought he was stupid because he didn't complete school, but he was smart enough to do very well on his farm. And in fact, I mean, very well to do at the end of the day. They lived a modest lifestyle too, because, God fearing people. And you compare that to today, and I don't know, it's almost like we have this luxury to sit around and think about who we are. Oh, I want to be this, or maybe I want to be that. And it's a privilege, really. There's people in the world that don't have time to think about who they want to be. It's just, you are who you are, and to survive today, I got to walk 5 miles to the well to get water. So, and if you pose that to some of the men or guys today, they'd be like, walk 5 miles? That sounds exhausting. I can't walk 1 mile and carry 2 buckets of 10 pounds of water. I can't do that. Like, so we're being turned into docile, weak creatures. That is sort of the agenda, the greater agenda of what's happening. They don't want men to be able. They don't want men to be capable. They don't want men to be strong and determined and have a passion and be on fire for something in their lives. That is the conditioning we're being given.
Yeah, depending on how the rest of this conversation goes, explore who they are. That third dimension to the male character is Gandhi. I just remembered around the connection to spiritual, whatever that looks like for people. Um, but that's interesting because of what you're touching on around. It's almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of thing, right? If you're concerned with getting water, food, and you're just looking to survive your basic human needs, how are you going to self actualize, which is this Gandhi Buddhism, or pick a modality, whatever it is that your consciousness expands. Um, how so let's take the case that there's an agenda that you've expressed. Say there's an agenda for some reason to want to, in using your words, make men more docile, less aggressive, less um, in their masculine frame, say. So let's take the case that that's happening. Why or who would want to impose that on culture? What would be the point?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have to trace the money trail to get back to the core of it. But if what I'm saying wasn't true, why would we be loading up all our foods with soy? For men, that's known to cause man boobs. It's known to cause fat.
Hey, how's the framing here? What are you saying?
You look good, Matt. Don't worry about it.
I like the example that you've expressed here around. Let's take soy as an example. So the case that you're saying, oh, there's more soy in food now because they're trying to emasculate, or say take testosterone out, or have men produce less testosterone. So putting this into dimension, there's someone's force or people who have an agenda to want to take the masculine out of men, and by doing that, one tactic that they're using is by putting more soy in the food. Okay, let's take the case that maybe that's going on, or maybe not. I think it's an interesting case to be made for that it is, but I don't know. But say that it is. On the other side of things, can you say, well, actually, in order to mass produce food and feed whatever amount of billion people, that we actually soy as an ingredient is the only way to ensure that everyone's going to get fed?
I mean, maybe to short circuit the question a bit, I would say, then why are all the farms being turned into industrial farms? And of course, you may respond by saying, well, that might also be because we have to produce and make more food. But then why is Monsanto telling what farmers what they can and can't make? And why are they giving them genetically modified seeds specifically? And why are farmers getting extorted essentially for the cash that they should be making for the hard work that they're putting in? And again, it could be that way, it may not be that way, but where it ends up leading is, okay, food is making you sick. It's simply not as nutrient dense as it used to be. You have to watch what you eat, you have to watch what's inside your food, and um, more foods than ever are contain some kind of chemical. Maybe it is for preservation. I don't really know because I'm not a food expert. But then where that leads is to uh, medication. And most people are on some kind of medication subscription plan. And the medication is also loaded with things that may or may not be good to your body, but let's just say it like it is. Every commercial says you might result in diarrhea, anxiety, migraines, headaches, stomach pains. And they're not joking. That's not a joke. They have to say that. And then so you have to keep tracing that trail all the way back to who has a vested interest in things going the way they're going. And so, and who's enforcing all the regulations is the government. So then you got to say, okay, maybe they're not in cahoots, maybe there's no conspiracy, but pretty much the government, the media who is telling you what you should and should not eat, the healthcare industry, and the food industry are somehow all connected and in on this.
There's definitely a circular economy around that. Feed people something, and see, and that makes them sick, and then they need medication, and then they come back, and we control the food industry. The same companies that control the food industry control the pharmaceutical industry, and it's just a, and I see that. Again, not with certainty, but observation that that would make sense or could make sense if that was true.
Yeah.
What about life expectancy though? Because if we were to go back 50 years, say even 100 years, life expectancy in a typical male who worked most of his life, say had a small family, life expectancy, you're in a small percentage if you get over 60. And now we have a life to, 80, 90 if you take care of yourself. Um, I guess what's that 2 decades worth though if you're sick?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think a lot of parties are that interested in trying to preserve seniors who can't work and are sick. There's sort of interest in the opposite direction, I would say. But the really convenient part about the question is you or I weren't there 100 years ago. We don't really know what it was like. Then you look back on biblical times, and apparently people were living 300 years, 500 years, 600 years. So, what happened to life expectancy now? Why can't we live to be 500 years? I've heard from some sources, and I'm not saying it's true, that there are people living to be 5, 6, 700 years old, even now. But of course, they have to do it somewhat undercover because if they're found out, they're the humanity would kind of be up in arms about it because they're like, oh, but we're told we only live to be 80. Well, there you go. Power of suggestion, power of words. We're told every day you're going to live to be 80. 40 years is old. That's your mid age, man. And your back half is going to suck. So make the best of your first half. It's all just words. It's power of suggestion. It's power of words. Is it true? Some people are living to be 120, 30, 40, 50. It's totally possible. And having a good life too. All I see about those people is, and there's not many commonalities, they're generally happy. They just enjoy life. As far as what they eat, some of them smoke their whole lives. They usually try to eat local. That's it. Some eat meat their whole lives. Some are like, oh, I just drink coconut water all day. And then some might have what we call a more stringent, strict diet, but most of them don't.
You mentioned diarrhea earlier, and I'm fascinated by the idea of imagine if you never had it till you were like in your mid 30s. That would be shocking.
That would be an unusual experience for most people, yeah.
That came up just part of the day over here at our agency. Um, yeah, I'd like to take the optimistic approach that generally speaking, mankind, human beings, we'd want the best for fellow man, that we would strive for a healthy, vibrant society, a society that's nurturing and truly wants people to be self expressed and feel positive emotions, joy, love, and not a society or from a top down context that's, kept certain truths. If you're using the example of people that could live 100, 200, I've researched into this as well. And you said something else that really resonated is like, really, if most people die within 100 years, anything that's happened 100 years ago, we really don't know. And if what they talk about, burning books, for an example, or the series of fires that have happened in all the major US cities, and some of the architecture being Roman in nature, and all the stories that were told about our past. We really only have what we're told or what's been written in books. And if books were burned, how do we know what's written in these books is true? Are you a flat earther, David?
I've looked into the topic And what I will say is, it's very difficult for me to come to the conclusion that the Earth is exactly as we've been told it is and described. Beyond that, I don't know if it's concave, convex, flat, or 3D or 4D. I don't really know. It's just the only conclusion that I could come to based on the evidence presented was it's not exactly as we're told. It could just be that it's way bigger than it's told. It could be that the Earth is round and simply stationary. But I don't see it moving in three contradictory directions simultaneously, hundreds of billions of miles per hour through space. That explanation does not ring true with my experience.
Welcome back to the WeMaple video show, where we say we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation, and yet for some reason it always comes back. I find these topics fascinating because as a baseline belief is I don't know what I don't know. I really don't know. All I know with 100% certainty is I'm some form of conscious being having some sort of experience with other entities or consciousness, and then there's all of these things to experience. And but as far as facts, like it, I really don't. I don't know. And it's the pursuit of that not knowing and playing it, like how actually crazy, like interesting would it be if that there is other races among us, other beings that are either mechanical, biomechanical, from other planets, have penetrated our governments and are controlling the monetary system and the you mentioned the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry. Like, I find that fascinating, the idea that there could actually be other beings and they're just having fun. Like they're like gone to the zoo, but they live in the zoo. Like, I think that I would want to go live in a zoo if someone was like, hey, we found this other planet. Nobody knows that we would look just like them, talk like them, behave like them, but really you were from another place. Like, how fun is that for an afternoon?
Absolutely. I think one thing I've realized, Matt, is, and this really is a conclusion that, I mean, I've heard people talk about it before, but when you have the deeper realization yourself that it must be true, it sort of becomes undeniable. Reality is malleable. Pretty much we've been programmed from day one to do a preset number of things and activities to get through life, to survive. I need to make money to survive. I need to eat to survive. Here's where I go to get my food. It's at the grocery store. Here's what I do after work. I go to the gym. There's a sort of like we're in a fence where there's a finite number of options of things that we do every single day because we don't know much else. But there are other people that have learned a lot about surviving, and they could tell you about the benefits of wheatgrass and all that kind of stuff. So as soon as you do something that confuses the universe, it's kind of like the Matrix. You just suddenly get up and wave your hands around like you're completely crazy. What happens? And I've had situations too where just based on how I was feeling, I was in the dumps. I kind of put it in our notes too. I think it was 6 months of hell and 6 months of heaven. So when I was really in the dumps and feeling bad about life, and I had 5 poorly paying jobs that took up way too much of my time and weren't helping me pay my bills, and I couldn't keep up with my mortgage and my utilities. And then my feelings changed. And then out of the blue, I get a phone call saying, hey, did you know you could refinance your mortgage? And I'm like, huh? What is that? Tell me more. Never heard about refinancing mortgage in my life. Never even heard the term, but I changed the feeling inside of me. And suddenly that popped up. There was a phone call out of the blue. So reality's got to be malleable.
I really like that. That ties into The Secret, of course, one of the most known kind of ideas around intentional thought and manifestation. Then there's Dr. Joe Dispenza that talks about the cellular biology and the way in which your thoughts, emotions, and intentions, the impact on health. And then also kind of using your example, you elevated consciousness or your feelings, and then you attracted a new conversation or opportunity, that just even goes back to the baseline of, have a positive attitude and positive things will happen. And my dad used to say this thing to me when I was a kid. He'd say you can either feel the way you think, or you can think the way that you feel. And I always, that always stuck with me. It is hard though. What advice could you give to people who are experiencing those hard times? Because when you're down in the dumps, as you've described, it's really difficult to pull yourself out and be optimistic, to be positive. What advice would you give to people to pull themselves out of that?
Hmm. It's hard for us intellectual people for sure because we're always going, well, life is shades of gray in between. And so it can't work that way. Like, it can't be that dumb that if I feel good, good things happen. If I feel bad, bad things happen. It can't be that simple. And we sort of have to just stop ourselves and, for a moment, consider that maybe life operates by a set of rules. And if we play the game as designed, we win. And if we can sort of just accept that premise blindly, it takes care of a lot of that mental gymnastics that we tend to do that go nowhere. Those mental gymnastics leave us feeling pretty discouraged anyway. We can clear that away. We can apply those mental resources to looking for creative solutions. So I'm not saying it's easy at all, but I think if you can sort of establish a default state, because typically it is your subconscious mind that keeps telling you, keeps drawing you back to past experiences and the way you felt about them. If we can intentionally clear that away and just be focused in the present, there's The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Read that. He talks about being homeless, penniless, owning nothing, sitting on a bench at the park and feeling incredibly peaceful and happy. I recognize this too recently, that like even in the midst of financial challenges, I wake up, I look outside, the birds are singing, the rain's falling, there's people going about doing their day. It's no different than any other day. So it must be my feelings that are determining, because the universe does not feel one way or another about you being broke. It just doesn't. So you're the one feeling some way about it and giving that up. Your Wish is Your Command by Kevin Trudeau. Listen to that if you haven't already. That might just knock you into an entirely different universe. Parallel Universes of Self by Frederick Dodson. Read that. That might just knock you into a parallel dimension. So go easy on yourself. Give yourself some time, but expose yourself to new input. I think Joe Dispenza always talks about that too. Like, if you're not in a good place, read a whole pile of books. Go listen to a bunch of podcasts. Make a new connection in your brain, and you'll get excited again.
It's all fantastic advice. There's a couple of other points here, and I'd like to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you in 30 to 60 seconds answer each one.
Rapid
What's
fire.
the what's the hotbox incident?
Yeah, so I was playing a gig in, I think it was Okotoks, and my buddies in the band were like, "Hey, we're just gonna go smoke in the car. Do you want to come?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm not smoking, but sure, I'll come and hang out with you guys, just to be cool or whatever." And then before we know it, the cops come knocking on the door, and we're all cuffed. And fortunately, we were all let go because we were the entertainment for the night, and I was not smoking myself, but yeah,
Is that the same story as getting the cops called on you?
that's different.
Tell me about getting the cops called on you.
So I was in network marketing at the time, and I was getting really creative with the way I was prospecting people. I go to like post offices, I would go to show homes just to dream build and then maybe meet people. And so I was going to this neighborhood of show homes, went in one, and then it was too late to go to the others. So I came back to the same neighborhood probably in a day or two. But for whatever reason, the girl working in one of the show homes decided I was really creepy for doing such a thing. I wasn't going to go back to the other show home where she was working, and then got the cops called on me, and then they had me sit in my car for, I don't know, an hour or whatever until they're like, well, just don't look creepy.
Hard for guys like us, eh?
I guess.
All right. What's three roommates and the sale of?
I bought a home in Hidden Valley in Calgary, and I had three fantastic roommates through the years. And even though I didn't exactly have the room accommodations to be able to do it, I think at one point there were all three staying there simultaneously, but they all sort of just came in, came out at different times. Usually there were at least two of them there, but sometimes three of them there. So they were all fantastic, but then they all got married and moved out within like a year of each other, pretty much 2008, 2009. And so yeah, I made things work for a little while in my house, but eventually I just had to say I'm going to have to sell the house and move on. And probably a blessing because I wasn't going to stay in Calgary forever. Just didn't know it yet.
And there's one last one that I like the title of 3 months of what the fuck.
Yeah, 2022. What a great time. That was a really interesting period. I was told, hey, we're selling the house. You're going to have to move out of the basement unless the new owners decide to keep you. The new owners did not decide to keep me. They wanted the space to themselves, or so they say. I think they just re rented the place, which you're not supposed to do in BC. Could have taken them for some money there. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, I guess I'm back to this nomadic journey because I can't find a house and I don't have enough time. I was finishing year one of the leadership program and I had a composing contract to do. So from there on, like I had a decent 2 week vacation in Chilliwack and Cultus Lake, but then it was a gradual, well, actually a pretty quick tailspin to like almost getting scammed and being taken for everything I was worth and declaring or filing for consumer proposal, which is a step away from bankruptcy for those who don't know. So debt consolidation, not the worst thing that could have happened to me, but still. And then ended up going all the way back to Calgary for 4 months to get my get something under my feet again with my parents. That will be told in a book called Digital Nomad, as in no dash mad, because it's my angriest book and I'm saying no to digital. So I'm providing the counter evidence to Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week for fun, though, mostly. And that book is due out end of June.
Well, as we near wrapping up this conversation, if we look up David Andrew Wiebe on Amazon, I'm seeing 9 titles here. Um, what advice could you give our listeners to writing and publishing a book the way that you have?
Well, if you are no good at it, or if you don't enjoy it, and you want a book, but you can't really dedicate the time or effort, you hire someone like me, a ghostwriter, to research and put it together for you. But if you've got the determination, another thing that I can do for people actually before I go there is I can bundle up and package your articles or courses or podcast episodes and turn that into a book. So if you've already got content, I'm more than happy to help you with that type of thing. But if you have the determination to do it yourself, try to do what people like Darren Rouse and Seth Godin have done. Blog, or even Joe Polizzi. He's got a great book, Content Inc. That's one of my favorites. Blog every day or blog every week with the intention of each of the one of those blog posts being a chapter or a section of your book. And then if you do that consistently, you'll have it done in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. But that fast tracks the progress where a lot of people sit around, like we talked about earlier, they sit around and think about it and never get around to it. You can at least get started in bite-sized chunks today if you're intentional about how you're publishing.
And where can people find you, David Andrew Wiebe?
A good central command center is David Andrew Wiebe, WIEBE.com. You can contact me. You can read my latest blog posts. You can listen to my podcast. You can see what else I've got going.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And there's a fantastic opportunity, I think, to pick up on a future episode. Conspiracies, aliens, entrepreneurship, dealing with trauma. What are some other things that the viewers can expect for you and I to touch on the next time we connect?
Yeah, those are great vignettes. I think we could potentially get into marketing as well, and possibly personal development.
The two things we actually do the most of: marketing and personal development. I think that's why we like having these conversations, because it's like when you're playing music or doing sports, you just it's like a way to just disconnect from what you're doing on your day to day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so excellent to have you on, David. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Really enjoyed this.
Me too. All right, peace.
Peace.